Okay, Thursday, 1st of August 2024. So, Thoughtful Thursday, Philosophy and Musings from Life. Adrian's Daily Vlog. Sharing smart stuff men should know. The is-ought problem and you. So, I did a video, I guess last week now actually, about mixing logic with emotions and combining the two when doing stuff, not to get too emotional when it comes to a logical question, yes or no, left or right, up or down. Yes, of course, for example. Just being more direct and logical. And something I came across a few weeks or a month or something ago was to take that logic, so to speak, and expand it and to get morality mixed up with emotions, or morality mixed up in general, where just because something is doesn't mean that it ought to be bad or ought to be good or ought to be neutral or ought to be seen as whatever, good, bad, ugly, whatever, taboo and beyond. So we want to be careful of life. I did a video about this as well, self-evident things. We want to be careful of life when we see things that are and is. For example, it is hot outside, that is truth. And then deciphering an ought from that, basing an ought on that and imposing a morality or ethics onto this, when there's a thing called subjective morality, in a sense of what is right or wrong is subjective depending on the time and the culture and place and beyond. So we're looking at is, things that are in life, it's hot outside, and putting morality onto that. And it seems we want to be careful of that. When you follow the logic of not mixing emotions and logic together, we want to expand that, and we eventually come across the is-ought problem. So a room is messy, we ought to do something. It's that idea right there, we ought to do this. Should we do this or should we do that? Or maybe nothing. This, that, this, whatever else. Just because something is and is doesn't mean we have to impose an ought onto it. And this line of thought, this process, eventually stumbled upon and inadvertently came across the is-ought problem. Now, I knew about this a few years ago, but I didn't think about it too much, just in passing glance and, taking note, whatever else. Is-ought problem. But it makes more sense. And I heard about it, this concept, this ancillary concept of it, this derivative concept of it, I was talking about a few weeks or months ago, in a different context. And it got me thinking about subjective morality. Because a lot of people, mankind, society, culture, whatever, will look at something that is and impose a morality on it, when that thing is amoral. Not immoral, but amoral. It's neutral, it's a tool, it's just a thing. It is just like saying it's raining outside, that's evil. Ooh. Or it is made of wood, or that's evil. Or just because something is made of wood, is made of plastic, or is raining outside doesn't mean that it is or it ought to be good, bad, ugly, moral, immoral. So it seems in life we have to try and distinguish when something is and when there's an ought. When something is, someone, people, society, whatever, entity, institution is imposing an ought onto an is, imposing a morality onto a something. So this example that I came across when I first started to go down this rabbit hole, so to speak, was that there was certain social action that some people see as purely mechanical. The action is irrelevant for this conversation. Really, it's topic of another video completely. But where some people see it as a pure mechanical action, just an is. It just is what it is. It is what it is. And they were saying that other people would see the exact same thing in a more sanctimonious, holy, this thing that would only occur when all the stars align, this magical event, this magical ceremony, when that's just imposing a morality, imposing emotions onto this mechanical event. It's just akin to saying, I sat down. Isn't that marvelous? Let's all party and celebrate. Oh, what a miracle it is to sit down, or what a miracle it is to lie down and sleep. It's just a mechanical procedure, a physical mechanical procedure. So this physical mechanical procedure was seen by some people in the light of this amazing sanctimonious event that happens only once whenever. Whereas those that look at the other people by different metrics would see the exact same scenario and just think it is what it is. It is what it is. And we can go into further topics, but That's a topic for another video with that mechanical in action. But it just is what it is. And so when you take that scenario, this person talking about those kinds of people, we have to be careful when we see something that is an is, it is made of wood, it is made of cotton, it is cold, and imposing a morality on that. Now, why do we have to be careful with that? Because that morality, one, is subjective morality. Two different people will look at the same is, it is made of wood, this cupboard made of wood, and draw two different emotional and moral decisions based on it. Whether right or wrong is irrelevant, but the matter of fact is they drew a decision based on something that came from here, the heart, the soul, as in their character, personality, values and standards, or here the logical, the brain, the logic, the thought process. That moral judgment came from a mix of these three or other things in terms of social aspects or influences or peer pressure and whatever else, and they could impose onto it. And by doing so, by imposing a morality on something that is an is, it's made of wood, by imposing morality, they risk missing the point. They risk holding themselves back. They misunderstanding something. They miss drawing a complete wrong conclusion, a cognitive bias, so to speak. Just because it could be raining doesn't mean that it ought to be bad. It ought to be a bad omen, for example. Just because something's made of wood doesn't mean it ought to be evil or immoral. That. Because you could then say, right, well, this goes totally into subjective morality straight away. Because you could draw false conclusions. You could say, just because you can drown in water, this truthful fact, you can drown in water, that means that all water is evil. Therefore, drawing a premise, coming from that premise, drawing an action, meaning we have to avoid water. It's a faulty premise based on faulty logic, as in, water is evil. No, it is amoral. Not immoral, but amoral, neutral as a tool, like a hammer, a nail, a chair, a table, a plank of wood, glue, it's a tool. And it's that right there, in the realms of subjective morality, we have to be careful about drawing oughts from an is. The door is closed, therefore, you ought to be doing something bad. You are doing something bad. Something behind the scenes, a secret conspiracy, so to speak. Oh, no, it just is at that time. And if we really follow that logic, we could go into destiny and free will. But that's a whole other conversation for the future. That's on my list of videos to do. But we have to be careful of that, imposing a morality on something that is. Getting morality and things mixed up. Just how we have to be careful avoiding getting logic and emotions mixed up. Why? These things risk leading us astray. We risk drawing wrong conclusions, coming to wrong premises in life, being inefficient in life. That, we need to be conscious of that. Coming to wrong conclusions that mean our lives, business, attitudes, priorities, values, standards, objectives, goals, you name it, are not as efficient as they could be because we have this thing holding us back. Just because something is doesn't mean it is an ought. The is ought problem. The room is dirty, so it ought to be cleaned. It is raining outside, so you ought to bring an umbrella. For example, it's raining outside, so don't go outside. Or it is sunny outside, so you ought to wear sunscreen. You ought to wear long sleeve clothes. You ought to wear gloves. For example. But that's an interesting thing to be conscious of in life, in general. Philosophy and the musings from life. But otherwise, sharing smart stuff, men should know, you will see me tomorrow.